Today we are going to learn about JavaScript. This is our first lesson in JavaScript, and we are going to learn JavaScript with a library on top of it called P5. So after logging into your Replit account, you can create a new REPL and type P5, and we are going to learn P5.JS. Please make sure you don't choose P5.JS Python. We want to do the regular P5.JS. So if you know the basics of Python a little bit, I'll start by explaining a little bit of difference between JavaScript and Python. So what are we learning today? JavaScript. So in order for us to run JavaScript, all we need is the browser. So whereas if you compare it with Python, we need a Python compiler. Only on a compiler we could run a Python. Even though we were using Replit to run Python on the browser, it would still run inside the Python compiler window. Whereas the JavaScript, if I can just open any browser and run it. That's the major difference. In terms of syntax meaning how you write the code, a JavaScript, every line ends with a semicolon, whereas in Python, we did not do anything. We can just end a line with nothing, right? We don't have to specify end of line. In JavaScript, just like how you see here, comments are done by double slash, but whereas in Python, we used to use the hashtag for comments. In JavaScript, when you want to declare a variable, we need the keyword let. So I can say let x equal to 0, semicolon. But in Python, you can just go x equal to 0. In JavaScript, if you're writing any function or if block or a for loop, all the blocks start with a flower bracket and end with a flower bracket. But whereas in Python, it was all dependent on how you indent the code. So that's why in Python, most of the time when we miss the indentation, the compiler will complain. But in JavaScript, you don't have to care about the spaces before and after the line as long as you use your blocks properly. Other major differences are let's say, how do I write a function in JavaScript? I can just say function name, open the brackets and go with my block, which is the flower bracket. Whereas in Python, when we write a function, we would go def and then we would write the name of the function and then we put a colon in the end, but there is no need for colon here. We are going to use the braces. In terms of when to use Python versus JavaScript, since it's running mostly on the browser, it is used mainly for building web apps. You can also do native mobile apps and web pages. On top of JavaScript, there are many frameworks like Node.js or the one that we are using right now, P5.JS, AngularJS, and many frameworks on top of it. But we are going to do P5 and we are going to learn the basics of JavaScript before we move on to any major frameworks. Python is always used for projects like scripting, machine learning, and anything that involves back-end coding. Back-end is what the code that runs on the server at the back. Front end is where you see the screens and the buttons that the end user interacts with. That was a quick introduction about JavaScript. Now let's quickly spend a few minutes understanding P5. On top of JavaScript, a P5 library has been built. So the advantage to P5 is it lets you build games, generate art. So doing all these fun projects while we learn the programming concepts. So that's why we have chosen P5 to learn our JavaScript. In P5, there are two main functions. The first one is setup, the one that you see here, and the second one is the draw function. Setup function gets called once at the beginning, and it is used to set up the stage, or in this case, canvas. Just like any art project, for us to draw something, we need a canvas. And we can create this canvas in the setup function, and we can set the size of it and colors and so on. Whereas the draw function gets called multiple times in a loop. So the draw function gets called again and again and again. So we can use the draw function as a game loop, if you know the concept of game loops. If not, we will learn in these classes. So we can use the draw function to draw on top of the canvas. Okay. So with that introduction, let's get started now. Hmm, Maybe I'll just add one more thing to the list of differences between JavaScript and Python. In JavaScript, in Python, we have learned lists. And how do we declare a list? We just go L is equal to and use the square brackets, and we can have more than one values in there. Similarly, here in JavaScript, you can call them lists or arrays, or sometimes called as array lists. And you can declare them like let L equal to, and just do this. And similar to Python, you can just separate each values by commas. As we get deeper into JavaScript, we learn other things like the if statements and the for loops and so on. But for now, here is a high level difference between JavaScript and Python. Okay, so now let's get started. Let's look at this first line. So when I create a P5 JavaScript in Replit, these lines of code were automatically generated. Okay. So the first line, what is happening is, as I said, let is to declare a variable. We are letting JavaScript know that we are going to declare a variable called color list. And what does it have? It is a list and it has 4 colors in it. Perfect. And we are declaring this variable outside the function. So that way, this variable is global, meaning both these functions know about this variable and they can use it. Whereas inside the setup function, if I declare a variable like x equal to 0, now this variable is inside this function and draw does not know about it. So that's the difference of declaring the variable inside versus outside. So what's happening next in the setup, as I said, we are creating the canvas. And here we have two variables here, window width and window height. We will see what that means in a bit. And now here we have background. So we are setting the background color of the canvas. The background color can be set with a number 0 to 255. This is a gray scale with 0 being black and 255 being white. So now let's change this to 0 and run our code and let's see what happens. And now we see our whole canvas is black in color. Now let's come back to this line, create canvas. It says window width and window height. Let's comment it out for a while and let's set our own size. I say 100. So I should always set the width first and then the height. So now I have set my canvas is 100 pixels wide, 100 pixels tall. Now let me run it and we see our canvas is much smaller now. If I change this and make it more wider, then it looks wider. And now, as I said, JavaScript can run in a browser, right? So right now, this URL is where the script is running. So I can copy this URL and paste it in a new tab, and I can see the same code running. And this URL can be open in any browser. It is not attached to this session. It can be open in any browser, any device, even your phones, and you will still see your JavaScript running. Now, instead of copying and pasting the script every time, you can also use this button, open in a new tab, and it will just open the script in a new tab. Wonderful. So then what is window width and window height? So not JavaScript, but the way the library on top of it, P5, gives us some standard variables that we can just use without declaration. And among them are window width, window height. Window width simply means make my canvas as wide as my window or my browser. So window width means my current browser size. So that way, when I create my canvas, I am not worried about which screen or which screen size you are having. And I just use these variables so it will be as big as your screen is. Similarly, window height is for the height of your browser window. So for now, I'm gonna just keep it to 400, which is a decent size. I can make it to window width and window height as well, so it will cover the full screen. As I move my mouse, I see there are circles being drawn and they are all of different colors. And if you notice, they are only one of the four colors that we have declared here, gold, yellow, turquoise, and red. Now let's see how this is happening. All that action is happening in the draw window because setup gets run only once at the beginning, whereas the draw window runs multiple times. Okay, so multiple times again and again. So what is happening now is we are saying here no stroke. We will come back to this. And then we have a fill and then ellipse. Okay, no stroke. I'm gonna comment this out for now. And let me also change the fill color to white for now. So what am I doing? I'm filling with white. Okay. Let me also comment this ellipse and let me simply draw a circle. And I say, keep the circle at 100, 100, the X and Y position, and the radius of the circle to 50. Now let's see what happens. So we see one single white circle. Why is the circle white? Because before drawing the circle, I have said fill it with white. If I change the color here, the circle color is also gonna change. And when I say circle, I have said X, Y position and the radius. If I change the X position to 200, you can see the circle move more towards the right. If I increase the Y position, you can see the circle move down. And if I change the radius, you can see that the circle is growing bigger. So let's quickly see how the um, setup works here on your canvas, the X and Y coordinates. Let's assume this is my canvas. Always the top left corner point is 0, 0. And this bottom point is the size of your canvas. And here in our case, it is 400, 400, right? Just to show the difference, let me make it 400 wide and 600 tall. So it is more tall. So this point is going to be 400, 600. So x-axis is 400 and y-axis is 600. And the top right is 0, 0. So now if I draw a circle at 0, 0, you see the center of the circle is at the top left and I see only quarter of the circle. If I draw the circle at 400, 600, that will be at the bottom right of my screen. So what is happening here? As I move right, my x value is increasing. Okay. So x value increases and it reaches my full width, which is 400. So this point is 400, 0. As I move down, my y value is increasing. And so this point is x is still 0, y is 600. So if I want a circle, let's say at the middle of the screen, I have to find the middle of the x and the middle of the y. So 200, 300. So I can draw a circle at 200, 300, and then the circle will be exactly at the middle of the screen. But if I change the size of the canvas now, my circle will not be in the middle anymore, right? So to ensure or to make sure I always draw it in the middle, instead of dividing this by 2, I'm going to say whatever is the width of my canvas, get the half of it. Whatever is the height of my canvas, get the half of it. So now my circle is in the middle, even if I change my window size. My circle is always in the middle. But what is this width and height? I did not declare those variables. That's because they are also standard variables given by P5. Width and height are the rent canvas size. Mind you, window width and window height are the browser size, the whole browser window. Width and height are the canvas size. Now, if I open it in a new tab, this black box is my canvas, but the whole white box is my window. Okay, good. Now, we have seen that this is how we can draw a circle, but how do I know what to pass when I call this function circle? So what we are going to do is we are going to go to P5.JS reference. This is the documentation of the P5 library. And if I go here and I say circle, I will see how to draw a circle. So it says the syntax is pass the x, pass the y, and pass the diameter. Oh, I stand corrected. I have been saying radius, but it is actually the diameter. You pass the diameter. So what does that mean in our script? That means from here to here, the length is 80. So let's say now I want to draw a square. I simply go here and see, and I can also see an example here. And I see a square can be drawn by giving x, y, and the s, which is the size of the square. And I have other optional parameters. I know they are optional because they are given inside the brackets. and it's also mentioned here optional. So let's go and now draw another square. I want to put the square at the position, let's say 10, 10, and I want the size to be 40. And let's see what happens. And now I see the square. And if I want the square to be a different color, I can just change the fill color before I draw the square. And then I say red. And now my square is red. Just like how we did in background, where we were able to specify a color in grayscale, I can also specify the color in a grayscale. So if I make it 0 and run my script, I'm not gonna see my square because I filled it with black. So it is right here, but it is hiding somewhere. But if I change it to a lighter tone, 150, then I'm gonna see it here. If I want the square to be white, I just have to say 255, then it'll be white. Good. Now, what if I draw the square also in the middle of the screen? So I'm going to say X and Y is width by 2, height by 2, and 40. So I see my square here, and even though I have specified the square X and Y as the middle of the screen, the square is a little off. Because when I draw the square, the point that I'm specifying X and Y is actually the top right corner. So I have put my square point X and Y at the middle of my screen. So that is why it is a little bit to the right. Let's change the size a little smaller to 20. And now the square is completely inside the circle, correct? Now I'm gonna remove the square and put it above the circle. Okay, and now if I run it, I don't see my square anymore. Why is that? Because the square is now behind the circle. Just like how you paint on a canvas, if you paint a small square and then you paint a big yellow circle on the top, you will not be able to see it anymore. If I change the color of the circle now to, let's say, white, I still do not see the square, but I can change the transparency of the circle by specifying another parameter. Let's say I specify 45, and now my circle is a little bit transparent, so I'm seeing the square that is behind it. So what is this number? This number is called as alpha, which is also a number between 0 to 255, and that will tell you how transparent the color is. If I now fill this with a transparency of 0, that means it is completely not being shown on the canvas because it is fully transparent. So it's almost invisible. If I change the number to 255, then it is not transparent at all, so I don't see the square anymore. So if I leave it somewhere in the middle, then I see my square at the back. Okay, so we learned fill, we learned the order of operation. It's always important to draw the inner shapes and the backgrounds at the back. For example, if the circle is bigger, draw the circle and then draw the square. So then you're sure that your square is not hiding behind. Let me also remove the transparency here. And as I told you before, the spacing of this all doesn't matter for JavaScript. Only in Python you have to be worried about indentation. But it doesn't look good. It doesn't look readable. So I always hit Command S or Control S and format the code so it looks a little bit neater. So we saw how to draw a circle, how to draw a square, and now let's see how to draw a rectangle. I'm going to fill the rectangle with green, and I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I can always go to my reference or documentation and go to rect, and I can see how to draw a rectangle, and it tells me specify the XY point and then the width and the height. Just like in square, here also the XY point means the top right corner of your rectangle. So I'm going to say keep my rectangle at 50-50, the top right, and make it 45 wide and 15 tall. So now I should see my green rectangle here. So now my rectangle is fixed here. If let's say I want my rectangle to move around, what can I do? Instead of always drawing it at 50-50, I'm gonna say draw it at my mouse X and mouse Y. So now let's see what happens. My rectangle is being drawn at the position wherever the mouse is. So now I start to see this pattern, almost like bricks jumping around. So what is happening? The draw function gets called multiple times in a second. Every time I move my mouse, a new rectangle is drawn at the new position. And the new rectangle is always drawn on top of what is on the canvas. So it looks like to be the latest one to be drawn. Now, what if instead of setting the background at the setup, I set the background at the draw function? So every time now the draw function gets called, I'm going to fill it with the background again and again. So now let's quickly see the difference. And now I do not see the old rectangles anymore. Why is that? Because now every time it's almost like I paint the whole canvas black and start fresh. So I only see what I have drawn in the current cycle and I do not see anything that I drew before. So based on the kind of effect we want, we can set the background in the setup function once or set it up in the or set the background in the draw function. That way it will paint the canvas every time. Okay, perfect. So there is one more thing I want to explain. Let's get rid of the circle. Let's get rid of the rectangle. Now all we have is the square. I will make the size as 80. So now if I run it, I only see the square, correct? And I have set it at the middle of the screen. So that's why the top right corner of the square is at the middle. But I can do something like rect mode center. Okay. So now if I run it, the square will be exactly at the center. Let's open it in a new tab and see. Let's refresh this. That doesn't seem to work. Let's quickly check the syntax rect mode. And we want to set the rect mode to center. So that will make, let's try this one more time. Okay, now I think it is in the center. Let's open it. Yeah, rect mode is in the center. So what we have done now is I have said whenever I draw a square, the point that I specify xy, do not keep the point at the top right of the square, but keep it at the middle of the square. So that's why now my whole square is in the middle because the point I specified is the middle of my screen and my square is also in the middle. Hopefully that makes sense. Now if I don't set the rect mode, it'll be a little bit off to the right. If I set the rect mode, it'll be on the center. So basically, wherever you want your square, you can still draw it with either of the mode. You just have to be careful about which point you specify, whether the center of the square or the top right corner. So with this introduction, the homework you will have for this class would be to draw the flag of at least 4 countries. Of course, we have learned only shapes like rectangle, square, and circle. So we can choose only country flags which have this option. For example, I can draw the flag of Japan. I say rect mode as center, and then instead of drawing a square, I'm going to draw a rectangle, place it at the center, so width by 2, x point is at the middle of the screen, height by 2, y point is at the middle of the screen. The Japan flag is going to be wider than taller, so I will make it 150 wide and 50 tall. So now I see this one. Let me make it a little bit more taller. Okay, good. Now all I have to do is put one uh, red circle in the middle. So I say circle. I know the circle has to be in the middle. So width by 2, height by 2. And I set the radius or the diameter to be 50. And now let's see if it looks good. I do not see the circle. Okay. Um, Here is the issue. I typed the spelling of width wrong. Okay. That's why the circle is not showing up. But I do not see any error either. If I don't have my eyes open, then it will take me really, it'll be really hard for me to debug this. So whenever you run into situations like this, the thing you have to do is open your P5 script in a browser and right click on your browser, say inspect, and this will bring up the developer console and click on the console. If you don't see your console here, maybe it is at the bottom. I have it open on both the sides, but it should be there. If this is also not visible, try clicking on this and pick console. Okay. And now if I click console, I can see the error. It says WIDHT is not defined and it says line number 62, position 9. So that way I know the error is in line number 62, WIDTH. So now I should see the circle. And if you notice, the circle has a black outline. And if you don't want that outline, you can say no stroke. So now I will not see the black outline. So here stroke means the outline for the shapes. If I say no stroke, I'll not see any outline. If I want to see outline, I can say stroke and make the color of the stroke as yellow just for the sake of it. So now what will happen? Any shape that I draw will have a yellow outline. Not sure if you can see the yellow color. Let me change it to blue. So now you see there is a blue outline for my white rectangle as well as my circle. I can also increase the thickness of my outline with stroke weight, and now the blue line is going to be even more thicker. Of course, we don't want any stroke for the Japan flag, so let's just say no stroke and run it, and we see our Japan flag. So your homework is to draw other country flags, big countries that have only rectangles and circles, and draw 4 flags on the 4 corners of the screen. Right now I have put it at the center of the screen. If I just want to move this to a corner, I'll change the X and Y variables to, let's say, 50-50. So it'll move to the top left corner. Maybe I have to increase this X value a little bit so the full flag will be visible. So now you can draw another flag in this corner, this corner, this corner, maybe one in the center. I will share this code as well along with this video, but have this code for reference. Do not fork it. I recommend you start a new REPL, choose P5.JS and go from there. Remember to have this code by the side for reference. Remember to follow all the JavaScript syntax. And that's it for today, friends. See you all in the next class. Good luck with your homework.